Hi, and welcome to the CAFMA Connect. I'm your host, Fire Chief Scott Freitag, and with me once again today, my very special guest, EMS Chief Doug Namiski.
Good morning.
Morning, Doug. How are you?
I'm good.
How was your trip back to Pennsylvania?
You know, always enjoy going back there, so had a great time. Back to work now, though.
Yep. Yeah, back into the fire, so to speak.
Yeah.
I think the first thing I want to talk about this week, Doug, before we get into our actual topic, which is some of the legislative wins that we had for the fire service this year. And when I say we, I mean the entire fire service, the professional firefighters, the Arizona Fire Districts, Arizona Fire Chiefs. It was a good year for us down at the legislature, but heavy lifts and a big fight. But before that, I just want to acknowledge not yesterday, we're recording on Thursday, on Wednesday this week, we had the memorial for Sergeant Richard Lopez, who was shot and killed in the line of duty last week, Yavapai County Sheriff's Office. Our thoughts and prayers continue to be with the Lopez family. I thought the memorial yesterday was a very beautiful tribute. And I know as part of the incident action plan, the leader's intent as described was to honor Sergeant Lopez, to honor Sergeant Lopez's family, and to honor YCSO and just to Sheriff Rhodes and your staff. You definitely met the leader's intent.
Yeah, absolutely. It was pretty emotional. Fortunately, I was able to attend that, got back from vacation the day before, so I missed out on all the planning aspects of that. And that's a big deal, putting together a plan, an action plan for an event of that size. It takes a lot of thought.
Well, we had a lot of support from the Department of Public Safety, our state troopers, from law enforcement in Phoenix, and other areas around the state that really came together. The procession was absolutely beautiful yesterday with everyone involved. And I just didn't want to start this podcast without acknowledging all the work that everybody did to put that together. And just, again, a shout out to our brothers and sisters at the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office. We enjoy a relationship up here between the fire agencies as well as fire and police. Mm-hmm. And we tend to take that for granted and not remembering that what we have here is pretty special with the support between all of the different agencies. And not everybody has that where they are.
I've heard the same thing. We work so well together with all of the agencies and law enforcement around here that, we used to pull pranks on each other and stuff on scenes. It's just that the way we are. So, yeah, I guess it's pretty special. It
is, and I think we still do that. And so to our law enforcement partners out there, any of them that are part of the tens of viewers that either tune in on YouTube or listen to us on a podcast platform, our thoughts and prayers are with all of you right now, and we thank you for the relationship that we are privileged to have in this area, because without their partnership, their participation, it wouldn't happen. Mm-hmm. And so thank you to them, and again, be safe.
Absolutely.
So, legislative, Doug, this was a big year. I know the Professional Firefighters Association, man, they went to bat for fire districts in the state, and it was a significant lift, including having the initial bill killed by the bill's sponsor. Note on that, always make sure when you get a bill sponsor that they're actually going to support what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And they thought they had. So that got killed. They found a striker in the Senate, Striker 1049, and they revived the bill, and it made it through. And a shout out to now retiring Senate President Karen Fann, who supported the fire service, was very supportive of the bill the firefighters ran, as well as the other bill we're going to talk about on the ambulance side. But the bill that the PFFA ran will help fund fire districts across the state of Arizona. It's a 1/10 cent sales tax that's been referred to the ballot, and it will be on the general election ballot in November.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that on the ballot and kind of getting that information out to all of my family and friends that, why it's important for us to get out and vote for that. A lot of people just don't understand the limitations that we face.
And while we can't come out and support it, so on the podcast we can't say, hey, we support this bill, we can educate people as to what the 1/10 cent, or we can't support the ballot measure, my apologies, we can't say that we support it, but we can provide factual information. And some of those facts, and we'll talk about them more as we get closer to the election, are that fire districts are currently funded under a regressive tax structure solely based on property tax. There are 144 fire districts in the state of Arizona. There's about 35 municipal agencies. And so when you look at the highways and byways throughout the state of Arizona, most of those are protected by a fire district. However, many of those fire districts, especially in more rural parts of Arizona, they don't have the funding to staff. So if you get into a motor vehicle crash on the highway, depending on where you're at, it's questionable as to what kind of care you're going to get at this point.
I just think that having a little bit of diversity in funding mechanisms for fire districts will be crucial to move forward.
Absolutely. And I shared an article last week from Forbes where it was talking about new businesses and the importance of diversifying your revenue streams. So right now, fire districts, we're like 98% funded, 99% funded by property tax. Only the people that own property within fire districts pay for the services. Yet anyone who travels through the fire district and uses the services can use them. There's not a limit on who can use the service, right? So property owners
I think of
pay.
Sedona, like in situations where all these hikers come up there and, they have to go rescue them on a mountaintop or whatever. And it takes a lot of manpower and hours and, those are typically just tourists that are visiting for them.
Right. So, and all of the tourist dollars that are spent and sales tax receipts received in the city of Sedona go to the city of Sedona, not to the Sedona Fire District. Only the people that own properties are paying for the Sedona Fire District, yet everybody who comes to Sedona, shops there, hikes there, stays there, eats there, they use the service, but if they don't live there and own property, they're not paying for it. And so the 1/10 of a cent would diversify the revenue for the fire district and ensure that everyone who utilizes the service or has the potential to utilize the service helps pay for it, which is exactly how municipal agencies are funded.
Exactly. I'm real hopeful that will go through this November and we'll see it on the ballot.
Yeah, and it would infuse money into our agency that would allow us to meet current call demand. So right now we know we're behind 124-hour engine. We also know that we can't raise the tax rate to collect another 1.2, 1.4 million in 1 year. So over a period of the next 3 years, we have to increase the tax rate and hire 4 people per year to get to the point where we have enough to staff an engine. And then that doesn't cover the money that's needed to build a fire station, which is $6 to $8 million in today's dollars. Well, if our data today says we're behind 124-hour engine and it's going to take 4 fiscal years, so after this fiscal year we just started, 3 additional to get to the point where we can have the 12 people to put the engine up, what's our data 4 years from now?
We're probably behind already again. So yeah.
What are we behind? So by diversifying that revenue stream and bringing those dollars in, allows fire districts to control that property tax number and provide services that we can't otherwise provide today. So that's just, we're not asking anybody to vote for it. We're just saying, here's the facts related to this. But anytime you put the T word out on a ballot, especially in a general election like we're having this year, in a recessionary environment, it's a challenge.
We're all taxpayers. You and I both,
Yes.
live in the district and pay our taxes. As long as you're educated on what you're voting for, I think you make, good decisions. So.
Right. And every time we go to the city of Prescott and shop in the city of Prescott, we're helping pay, you and I are helping fund the fire department there. Every time I go down to Phoenix and I shop in Phoenix, I'm helping fund the Phoenix Fire Department. So we'll see where that goes. But again, a big thank you to the Professional Firefighters Association who fought so hard on this heavy lift. I went down a couple of times as the fire chief of CAFMA and sat with the Republican caucus on the Senate side and visited with them on the bill. But this year we had to be very strategic because we had the ambulance bill running, we had this bill running, and what they didn't want to do was cross the streams. like Ghostbusters.
Never cross the streams.
Never cross the bad things happen when you cross the streams.
Except when you have to defeat a large enemy.
That's true. Yeah, the Marshmallow Man.
Yes.
You had to cross the streams. On this one, we didn't want there to be any confusion or any way for someone, whatever entity that may be, to be able to go to legislators and say, hey, they're only running this to get this, and then it kills everything. So we kind of had to go down two separate paths and occasionally cross each other to help out. But it was strategy. Everything's strategy, right? You want to win a football game, it's strategy.
You're the master for that kind of thing.
I don't know about that. This was a lot of work between all of us coordinating. So House Bill 2609, which is the ambulance license reform that the Arizona Fire Chiefs Association ran with the support of the Fire Districts Association, with the support of PFFA, with the support of Arizona Ambulance, and then with support of individual governing bodies as well, City of Scottsdale, CAFMA, all came together, hired a lobbyist, and we worked really hard because House Bill 2609 represents the first substantive change in ambulance licensing statutes in 40 years.
I'm excited.
Decades.
Yeah. I mean, we were a part of that meeting. I think we talked about it in a previous podcast, but, being first responders and we're going to these calls and then being told by the Attorney General that we don't have standing in a meeting to adjust some response times for a private ambulance was a kick to the teeth, and
right.
That just didn't sit well with anybody. Like, how is it that we're running these calls and yet just because we don't run an ambulance, we can't be a part of that conversation? So part of this bill corrects that.
It does. So it goes much further than just flipping the process, and we'll talk about that. But it changes the way that data is supposed to be collected and then provided to the state and then made public.
That's another big win right there, public data.
Because there is a private entity within the state that says our data is proprietary. We don't have to turn it over to you. Well, what kind of questions does that cause for people who already think that their data may be questionable to begin with?
It seems like you would have something to hide if you're doing that,
Right.
It's just, questionable.
It's kind of funny, in a stakeholders meeting that we had on this bill, the question was asked, well, if we request data, how long does it take you to produce that, turn it over to us, the state, whatever? And Priority, or Maricopa Ambulance, said, usually within 2 weeks to 30 days, we can have it turned around. Another private company just kind of sat back in their chair and said, well, it's not that easy. It's just, Doug, it's hard, one. Two, what he said was, and I quote, we have to distill the data first before we can turn it over. Joda, what does distill mean to you?
It has something to do with whiskey, I thought.
It does, yes, absolutely. Kirkland, small batch, fantastic.
I just picture the Andy Griffith show and the guy with the, distilled.
Yeah, he was in jail all the time. So, Mesa Fire, God love them, their assistant chief piped up and said, we can turn our data over in 2 weeks because we don't have to distill it. And I just sat back and smiled because I wanted to say something, and I know you're going to find this unusual. I didn't because Chief Hayes just nailed it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was perfect. So distilling data, not something we get to do as a public agency. So this, and quite honestly, a lot of the data stuff actually came from the governor's office.
I think a lot of that had to do with some of the stuff that we were pushing for change. I mean, we've been providing data to the state for years and asking for change about response times and how they calculate those, and why isn't this public knowledge for everybody?
Right.
It's hard for us. We submit everything. We don't have anything to hide. If you want to see our data, come on down. We'll be happy to show it. Some of it, is great. Some of it is like, we can do better here. We're the first to admit that.
Sure.
So, yeah, in my opinion, just show people what they deserve to see.
This also requires a common GPS system and ambulances with commonly defined response time terms and times to understand what those are. So just from a data collection standpoint, it really cleans that process up, where today it's all an honor system. You give yourself a gold star, say we did a great job, and the Bureau of EMS says congratulations and pat you on the back. It's not the way it's going to be moving forward. So that's good.
Yeah. We'll have real oversight, somebody actually looking over this data. You know, I'm sure they're going to have a lot of systems that they're going to have to build to be able to review all this data. But at the same time, going forward, we will have a process in place to follow, and it's all going to be the same for everybody. So,
and part of that, Doug, and we should put this in here right now as a disclaimer, we did agree to a 1 year or 18-month deferral for the effective date. So this law doesn't go into effect until January of 2024, because the Bureau of EMS needs time to develop rules and processes and documents for things. So we understand that. They asked for some time. We gave them some time. They also asked for some additional people, which required an appropriation. President Pham was kind enough to help us get that appropriation so they could hire folks. To be honest with you, we all knew that the Bureau of EMS was understaffed as it is. So they needed more people one way or the other. Moving on to another part of the bill, the emergency clause was something that one agency fought us on. Ultimately, we came out and finally said, we're not changing it. It's staying. Senate President Pham and the legislators agreed with us. And the emergency clause is something that we've asked for as CAFMA because of the lack of services in our area. And in the current statute, it said that the Bureau can issue a temporary or an emergency CON. They interpreted that to mean only to another CON holder, so we couldn't get one. We changed that language to say that they can issue a temporary or emergency CON to a fire district, fire authority, or fire department, as well as a current CON holder.
Yeah, and I'm glad it defined all the different levels of government because, as you know, we're a fire authority now, and that has been kind of used against us in legal terms. So
yes, it has.
Yeah,
and yeah, we're way more cognizant when we go to the legislature now about how we write these things out. And even Leg Counsel asked on a couple of occasions, she said, "Why do you have to write this out like this?" And when I explained to her where we had been missed in like the marijuana law.
COVID funding,
funding, as she understood, she said, okay, I get it now. Now I know to look for it, which is great. We're able to work with Leg Counsel who reads all of these things, and now she knows to look for the fire authority piece, which is good. So another win. I think the staple, there's just a lot of stuff that changes, but kind of the crux of this bill, the foundation, so to speak, is flipping the process for certificate of necessity, CON, ambulance license, applications.
Yeah, so we have to have this CON in order to operate a ground ambulance in this state. And it is a very long process. It's cumbersome. It costs a lot of money because you're fighting, a legal battle essentially from the very get-go. And I think that this bill flips that and puts the onus on the Department of EMS and Trauma to determine whether the need is there and the director can grant that initially.
Right.
And then it puts the court process behind it.
Exactly. So people understand right now when you submit your license application to run an ambulance in the state, the Bureau has 440 days to review that and make a determination on whether or not you're fit and proper and is the application complete. Now, at that point, if no one intervenes, then they can just issue the CON. So I push back on the argument that the Bureau tried to make that, well, we don't actually make the determination until after there's a hearing. Well, that's not true because if AMR, let's just call it what it is, they intervene in every CON because they never have to get one in the state again, at just about every CON. If they don't intervene, then the Bureau goes ahead and issues the license, the CON. So from that standpoint, they're already making the decision. So today, you you put your license in, the Bureau reviews everything, and then they put it out to hearing. So they don't issue a decision. They put it out to hearing, and then if someone intervenes, now you start a court process immediately up front. Now, that's different than any other department in the state. Every other department, the director makes the decision, and then if there's an appeal, the appeal happens then. So we have flipped that process where now, under 2609, the director will make the decision, and then it's appealable. Why is that important? A lot of people ask that. Here's my non-legal opinion. If they take us to court up front, then the applicant has the burden of proof to prove that there's need in the area for them to operate.
Mm-hmm.
By moving that court process to the end, at that point, the Bureau of EMS has reviewed every document and made a determination one way or the other. Now the appellant, whoever files the appeal, has the burden of proof. So let's say for CAFMA CON, the Bureau of EMS says, no, we don't think there's need. Well, then we can appeal that decision, and as the appellant, we have the responsibility. The burden of proof is on us to prove that their decision was in error, was wrong. If they say yes, CAFMA should have a CON, then if AMR, for example, should file an appeal, then AMR has the burden of proof to say that to show the director's decision was an error. And then once that's done, then it goes back to the director. The administrative law judge makes a recommendation to the director makes a final decision, and then the final appeal for anyone is through Superior Court. That's the process. Personally, I feel like flipping it was vitally important to moving the process forward.
It's not going to help us. Our process is already, engrossed into the system. So this law, because it is a law now, it was signed. It's not going to really help us at this point. We're in the meat of it. But going forward, all the other agencies out there, fire districts and such that are looking at this, and in a situation, we've been in contact with numerous other agencies that are experiencing the same lack of service from their private ambulance providers, and they want to make it right too. They just don't know how to do it. So, for them, they have a little bit, hopefully a better process for them.
Well, and some may ask, why was CAFMA so passionate about this if this bill isn't going to impact our CON? Well, in the beginning, we thought that once the bill was signed into law, it would have an effective date 90 days after sine die, I think that's how they say it. Basically, the legislature adjourns. 90 days from the governor's signature, it would become law, and then it would impact our CON. Ultimately, it didn't. And we're okay with that because the reality is, one, it was sponsored by the Arizona Fire Chiefs Association. It's a statewide issue. And we pushed it, and CAFMA pushed really hard to support the Arizona Fire Chiefs Association in this because it was the right thing to do.
We had talked about it in the Arizona Ambulance Association meetings for a few years now,
right?
And it took that much research, and why would this be supported? And there was, at first, it was questionable. There was very little to go on, but as they dug into the issues and saw what we were facing up here,
right?
And I think I'm just real happy that this process has occurred, and kudos to you and really fighting hard for this. I think it's going to be a game changer.
It will be in the future of, or for the future of Arizona, the entire state. This is going to help people out, help communities across the state who are seeing the similar issues to us. And that's the important thing. And when I named all the people that helped on this bill, it shows that this was important to the fire service statewide. This was not a single agency issue. It was not a single person issue. It was a state issue. And it did take about 3 years to develop language that was supported by everyone and understood by everyone. And then we had everyone's input on it. And still, we ended up with, I think, 6 or 7 very painful stakeholders meetings down at the Capitol throughout this legislative session, in the end, I think we came out with a very clean bill, and nobody got everything they wanted, but we got a lot of substantial changes in here that relate to data, that relate to emergency authority, that relate to flipping the entire process so that it's not so burdensome for an applicant up front. And I think that's important. And we got staffing for the Bureau of EMS, which they needed.
They got to be stoked about that too, I would think.
Well, one would think. We'll see. We'll see. We get to visit with them next week at the leadership conference down in Glendale, so that'll be good. The other bill that passed was kind of a cleanup bill. So under consolidations and mergers, there was an old law on the books. They had to go downstairs to microfiche. Actually, they had to go back before microfiche, blow off an old logbook to pull this thing out from the late 1800s, early 1900s, where if you merged or consolidated, let's say that one agency had a bond that was approved and they merged with another, under the law previously, when they merged, all taxpayers were now responsible for the bond. So that was a little bit hard to swallow for some of those agencies that had done the mergers and consolidations. So now whichever community approved the bond remains responsible for those bond dollars. And hopefully that removes another barrier to consolidations and mergers in the state for fire districts. As we said, there's 144 of us. What we have found through the fire authority is that we can take two, bring them together, and work very well and be a lot more efficient.
Taxpayers win on that one as well. You know, now, like you said, they're not sharing that bond debt.
Right.
They're keeping it separate, which I can see how that would be beneficial.
And at the same time, they're creating more efficiencies. They're creating more stability within fire districts. And you're seeing more and more fire districts come together and talk about how do we work together to ensure that we can continue to provide services. Part of that is the regressive tax structure, which the 1/10 of a cent sales tax we discussed would certainly help with that diversification of revenues. At the same time, it would offer some additional stability, and I think it will just help other agencies move towards that merger or consolidation as well.
Yeah, maybe someday we can do that.
Yeah. So something else, we just had a fee change, and I know this is exciting to everyone. Jonah's excited about it. We had a fee change because there is something called the gift clause in Arizona, and it is in the Constitution, as a matter of fact, where a tax-supported entity cannot subsidize a private company. Now, this is my legal interpretation. I am not an attorney by trade, and I did not watch, what was that show?
But you stayed at a Holiday Inn Express.
I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express. Jonah, what was the show?
Night Court?
Night Court? I'm not Night Court. I'm not Judge Judy.
The People's
Oh, no, that's
Court.
People's Court.
People's Court. Yeah, we don't have the music for that. It's probably some sort of protected thing. But we are going into the People's Court right now. That's what this is. The people are holding court on the podcast regarding this fee. So an ambulance company that has a transport license has a responsibility to serve a community. They have the sole responsibility for transport because they're the only licensed provider. And that would mean, seemingly, that they have a responsibility to provide a paramedic on calls that require advanced care. Not just advanced life support, but advanced care, right? Broken leg, we've talked about it before. IV, narcotics, that's advanced care. Patient has to stay with paramedic.
And we have a medic on every one of our engines, so we're always providing that service at that level.
We are. And we cannot pass a patient to a lower level of medical care or lower level of certification provider without the approval of our medical director.
Very specific circumstances. It's a BLS patient, meaning, non-life-threatening patient. Our medic has assessed them. They've called the hospital, and then the physician at the hospital has agreed to allow a BLS ambulance to transport the patient at that point. Then we can do it, but it's it's few and far between.
Right. Yeah, because the hospital doesn't like making the call that, paramedic, hand this patient off to an EMT.
Mm-hmm.
So with that said, we established there's a private company, has a responsibility to provide a particular service. They're not providing that service. They're providing EMTs or basic life support. And as of, I think it was 2 weeks ago, the last time we looked at it, and I know the number's gone up since then, but from July 1st to the middle of June of 22, 998 times that we had to provide the paramedic because the ambulance showed up without a paramedic.
Exactly. So we're riding in on, all we get on scenes anymore is really BLS ambulances. So we're riding in with our medics to every day, many calls. And that's a long process. We take an engine out of service for at least 1 to 2 hours, depending on where they're
sometimes
driving.
3.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you have engine 63 or 57, you're going to be out of service a lot longer.
Yep.
So we're then providing the medic.
We do. We send one in.
And those are on calls where you have the 2 EMTs on the rig. The patient has to remain in the care of a paramedic, just one. If the ambulance had shown up with a paramedic, then our medic wouldn't have to ride in.
Sometimes we will, even if they have a medic, but that's more of a, this is a tough call, I need the help kind of a situation.
We just highlighted one recently. That was a cardiac arrest. It was a save, thankfully, where the ambulance provider did arrive with a paramedic. The patient was in such a critical condition that our paramedic rode in as well. And on the way to the hospital, they stopped at Station 75 in the city of Prescott and picked up additional help.
Yep.
So there are those calls, but we're talking about calls that the patient has to remain with the paramedic and they're showing up without one. Now they're able to bill. Mm-hmm. We don't get paid for any of that. And in my view, and in the view of our attorney and another consultant attorney, we are at that point subsidizing a private company, which is a violation of the gift clause under the Constitution of the state of Arizona.
And I think that's where we're going to have to fight this one out, you know.
We may have to go beyond the people's court, Jonah, on this one.
Do we have to call Judge Wapner out of retirement?
I think
we
so.
could, yeah, or maybe Judge Judy. I don't know. But we're going to have to get somebody in there because there's going to be a little bit of a fight on this one. In the past, when it was Central Yavapai and Chino Valley, they would collect $100 for per call when they had to provide the paramedic because the ambulance didn't show up with one.
We would fill out a little, like an invoice almost.
Right.
And then every time we did that, we'd submit that to the office and they would bill for the $100.
So we're going to be doing that again, except that the fee schedule the board passed is $550 per transport. That is the market rate that we established based on a contract we already have with the state of Arizona for a Type 1 fire engine and a crew. Mm-hmm. So 3 crew members.
Can I just ask a question?
Yes, sir.
You said 998 times between January 1st.
July 1st.
Less than a year, yeah.
Okay, so from July 1st of 2021
right
to June 20, that's about $550,000.
I was thinking the
exactly.
same thing, yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of mone. Now, we're not going to back bill for this. We're just going to bill moving forward. And our attorney's working on a letter to notice the agency. Bureau of EMS, I talked to them because full transparency. They had some concerns. They felt they needed to approve the rate. They felt that we'd have to have some agreement. None of that, in our opinion, is accurate. Not just mine. I'm not Judge Scott, but in the opinion of our attorney. So our board passed the fee schedule. Now, where did we get the $550? We said it was from a contract with the state for off-district assignments. And it's our hourly rate for a Type 1 engine and a crew is right at $275 per hour. Right now, our crews are out of service when they have to transport in a good 2 hours, sometimes longer. So the board opted to go with a 2-hour flat rate of $550 based on the contract we have with the state that sets what that Type 1 engine and crew is worth on an hourly basis. If we don't charge them, then according to our attorney and another attorney, we're in violation of the gift clause, which is in the Constitution, which kind of overrides any type of, rules and stuff that any agency may have. However, there are no rules related to this. There's no precedents related to this. We're kind of the first ones that said, you know what? This isn't working.
And I think that's why we're going to end up in court over it, because, like you said, no precedent. It makes sense when you think about it.
Sure.
And the reason why the Bureau wants to regulate it, they regulate contracts between political subdivisions and ambulance companies. So if we had a contract with AMR for this service, then they would have standing to say, whatever this rate is makes sense. Mm-hmm. But since we don't have this contract with them, we're out of their regulatory measure.
We don't have, we won't have. The only agreement that we would have with AMR is when we are successful in obtaining our CON, we would have a backup agreement, because that's the right thing to do between all ambulance providers to ensure the best for the community. The fact of the matter is that because we're in violation of state statute, we don't need an agreement with this company to say it's okay for you to charge us this amount of money. No, the statute says that I have to charge you a market rate, and that market rate is established by the contract we have with the state already.
And every fire district, every fire agency that goes off district has, these rates established. So
sure.
If this works for us, I guarantee you, other agencies are going to follow.
Right.
That.
Well, and then maybe they'll do a little better job of ensuring that they have the right people on the rigs. Because here's the other concern that I'm hearing from folks is that some of these new EMTs on the ambulances are coming out. They're brand new. They're getting questionable training on Code 3 driving, and they're being put behind the wheel of the ambulance. And some of our crews are concerned about their safety riding in with some of these newer drivers. And it's not the fault of the employee in the field. It's the fault of the agency trying to rush people through and get them on the street. I understand they're shorthanded, but we have our opinions of why that is. And it is not because of a paramedic shortage nationally. If you treat people properly, people will stay with an organization. If you don't, they tend to leave.
Yeah, we'll see. As we know, Priority got their CON, and they're in the process of ramping up. And so if they can do it with medics, then we'll say, what's the problem? Right.
Well, and we have some of those medics and EMTs calling us already, asking us to hire them. They'll run our rescues for us. We can't do that. I'd love to.
Yeah. Because they want to work for an agency that they feel they want to be a part of. So
yeah. Well, they want to be valued.
Yeah.
And I think when we look at the workforce today, and we look at what some have termed the Great Resignation, when you read articles about people leaving employment or going a different direction, a lot of it has to do with whether or not they feel valued where they're at. And with the pandemic and all the lockdowns and working from home, people really had a chance to kind of decompress some and think about, is what I've been doing working for me and my family and my life? And does my employer value me? And if not, I'm going somewhere else.
Yeah. Seen a lot of people resigning lately from AMR, and that's why they can't staff right now. I know they have new EMTs. Mm-hmm. They're great people that want to do a great job, but they're just very green.
Yeah.
So, it takes a year to get your feet under you when you start a brand new career like that. I'm sure in a year they'll be driving, the way we want them to, but
right.
That's a long time from now.
There'll be more seasons. What we don't want to see is something like what happened, unfortunately, in with Salt River.
Yeah.
That tragic ambulance crash. So I need to talk to our attorney today, because a recommendation was made that we send a letter from the attorney outlining our concerns, so we have it on the record. But the bottom line is we support those EMTs in the field. We support those paramedics in the field, absolutely, without question. They are doing the best they can with what they have and with what knowledge and information they have today. But as you said, as they're in the field longer, they're going to become more experts in their craft, and that'll be great.
Yeah, I mean, when I started in EMS, I was very, very green. I didn't have any experience, and it took a few months, for me to even feel comfortable
Sure.
running any types of calls. And, thankfully we had people that were considered mentors that, would show you the ropes. And, over those couple of months, you start to understand the system, and things got better, and now it's just the way it is. However, we just have a plethora of new folks all at once. I don't know that we're used to seeing it in quite that quick of a fashion. Right. So we're trying to digest it. Our guys are riding in so much that they're not burned out, but they're definitely
tired
feeling
and
the
frustrated.
pressure.
I can tell you that.
Yeah, they're feeling that pressure. So we're all trying to accommodate each other here, and I think so far we're working well together. I'm very much looking forward to when Priority can get some rigs on the street to help alleviate some of the situation.
Well, and some may be asking, what's the delay? The delay is that AMR filed another motion in Superior Court, which is their right to do under the statute. They have asked the judge to stay their CON, which would mean they could not operate until the Superior Court decides whether or not the director of the Bureau, the director of DHS and Bureau of EMS somehow erred in their decision to give Priority the CON, the license to operate up here, which is something that the administrative law judge recommended based on the hearing that they had. And, it's odd in this state, Doug, and I know we need to close out. It's odd in this state that a community can be held hostage by a vendor who doesn't provide services that they're supposed to provide, and they have zero options because of state regulation.
That's why 2609 was going to help those agencies in the future.
Right.
That emergency clause where, agencies like ours would be able to ask for that temporary authority and actually help right away.
Right.
Which we're doing with the rescues. It's just, we can't bill for it. So we're eating that. But
absolutely. And
that's a whole nother topic. We're going to get way
different
off.
topic. We'll be way off base. Jonah, anything to add before we close out? Because people love to hear from Jonah. He's the voice in the background. It's awesome. Doug, thank you very much. Jonah and I are looking forward to next week at the Leadership Conference. Him and I are presenting on how to get tens of viewers for a podcast. It's going to be awesome.
We are certainly experts at that.
Yes, we can get tens and sometimes fives. It just depends. But when Doug's on, for whatever reason, people like you. I don't know.
Me either.
Yeah, you get more love here than anywhere else.
Maybe I should, have a podcast.
You should have a podcast, Doug.
I don't know.
All right. Well,
no more podcasts.
No more. With that, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Make sure you tune in, listen to what we have to say or not. I don't know. It's kind of like Seinfeld's show about nothing. All right. Great. We will be off the air next week because we will be in Glendale, but the following week, don't you worry. We will be back whether you want us or not.